All right, let's get this party started. Somebody sent me an ABBA and Preach video about Jordan Peterson speaking out against Andrew Tate, and I wanted to just watch the Jordan Peterson video instead of getting the commentary, secondhand. Yeah, we just released our 4-hour review of the Andrew Tate Tucker Carlson thing. It was a mess. It was just full of Andrew Tate just lying about his situation by every objective metric. Like, he was saying it was all over TikTok, right? Which was part of it, apparently, which has very little to do with the lawsuit. There was zero pushback from Tucker because, unfortunately, conservatives, their desperation to be anti-woke now has caused conservatives to become like pro horrible things. So, I don't know. But anyway, let's see what Jordan Peterson has to say.
Opinions
This is about a month old.
on Andrew Tate and the masculine movement happening in young men across the globe.
Well, first things first, I understand a lot of young men are feeling disenfranchised. This is true. It is true. That's probably what he'll start with, though.
Well, I really haven't said anything about Andrew Tate, and I probably won't tonight. But
Oh, they're booing him.
well, I'll make a few comments about the Andrew Tate phenomenon. I would say is that the mystery is there is a mystery in relationship to Andrew Tate, and the mystery is why is he so popular? And I think part of the reason he's so popular is because he doesn't easily bend a knee, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that. It's frustrating to listen to something that acknowledges the charisma of Andrew Tate, right? Because it sounds like a positive. Like, he is a very charismatic person, which is why he's able to manipulate people so effectively, especially unintelligent people like Sneeko and Aiden Ross. But that's definitely part of it. And that's something I've criticized other people for as well, is I wouldn't even say bend the knee. It gets very Game of Thrones-esque. But just completely concede to a point the second you get pushback, I find it to be a profound amount of weakness. You'll see that all over social media. You'll see somebody have a take and then get a lot of pushback from a particular community. And the second they get that pushback, they'll switch their perspective. They'll give a performative apology. Like, this happens a lot more than you probably think. There's a lot of creators you probably like that have made minor mistakes or haven't even made mistakes at all, but they will concede as if they have made a mistake because they're getting community pushback. And when I see that, I find that to be such a profoundly weak thing to do. So, like, yeah, there are people that are probably feeling good about that. A lot of young men are probably like, oh man, he's getting so much hatred and he's not folding. Like, what a cool guy. That's definitely true. A part of it is that a lot of young men are feeling a bit disenfranchised, and I think that's because the conversation about women's issues has gone too far. And I think that happens to every social movement, which is, I think that the male advocacy movement has done the same thing, right? What happened with women? Like, we have historically lived in a patriarchal society, a male-dominated society. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. There's nothing wrong with advocating for women. One of the problems is it's especially young people on TikTok, but you'll have a lot of young people, especially young girls, that will go on TikTok and they will use the historical oppression of women from men, male-dominated societies, to justify hating young men, which I think is ignorant, and I don't think it helps. I get it, right? Because some of these young women have been hurt by men. I get that. And they're hearing different messages their whole life. As a woman, you're hearing the messages of, like, you cannot go outside by yourself. I mean, I know it sounds like such a small point, but there is just like a fundamental restriction of freedom when you hear things like you have to make sure if you go out at night, you have to go out with a man, not in a way for the man to own you, but in a way for the man to, like, protect you, because you could get very hurt. And I think that there's something very oppressive just not being able, just understanding, especially from like a father figure, that you're not fully free to move about the way you want. So there's a lot of frustrations there, and unfortunately we take it out on all men. And in the same way that there's a male advocacy movement, as the manosphere grows, and it's just like, hey, we're people too, it's grown to a toxic point where now you have individuals like Fresh and Fit, who are rape apologists, who will tell women that it's their fault for being assaulted, that they should have picked better men, or they will actively, utilize their status as a podcast host and say you're only allowed on my podcast if you'll have sex with me. And they'll justify Andrew Tate and his behaviors of him sleeping with like a 15-year-old girl, and then of grooming her into being what he calls his bottom bitch to help him groom other girls. I would consider what he was doing with his sex trafficking and whatnot, grooming, to do his webcam service through the lover boy method, which you can disagree with that being sex trafficking, but you are objectively incorrect definitionally, and it's grown to like such a weird area. And like I think that's a lot to do with the Andrew Tate phenomena. But there's so many factors. Another factor is we just don't have fathers in the households anymore, or not even in the households. We don't have father figures in young men and women's lives, especially men in this instance lives. And there's various reasons for that. But I would say that that's a fundamental failure of a man. The men, as a man, you don't have to be a good husband to be a good father. They're just opting out. Unfortunately, it's a sad. You hate to see it, but it's an unfortunate, very sad thing. I think part of that has to do with the normalization of being too overly sexually promiscuous for men, in a way where they're able to just be like, okay, I fucked her. Oh, I didn't want the kid, so I'm just gonna like kind of abandon her. Even if you have to pay for child support, it doesn't make you a good father. There's a massive amount of emotional, of the lack of emotional male emotion in that kid's life. There's so many factors, there's so many factors to it, but yeah, that's what it is. There's another factor is that he's just cool, right? He's a strong guy who used to be a fighter, which plays to the mythology of man. If you look at like historically, what's the mythology of man? The mythology of man is you start as this underdog weakling character, and you see this portrayed in movies and any type of anything, and you grow and you become the strongest, you become the best, you get anything you want, you get the money, you get the women, you get the luxuries, you get the status, you get the fame, you get the you get the respect. And Andrew Tate plays to that mythology of man, and also that mythology of woman. What's the mythology of woman? You get to support that man who's great, and men want that. And I think that's also something that turns a lot of women off to Andrew Tate, is because and that's another thing that turns women off from wanting to be women, just from an ideological perspective. I see a lot of men say, I'm a man, and I'm one of those men. I'm a man. It makes me feel very powerful. I have a wife who makes me feel like a man. My wife doesn't go around going, I'm a woman. She doesn't find power in that. She finds power in being a good person. But because there's a mythology of man is so incredible, and the mythology of a woman historically has been identified as just being a supporting character. I think there's just so many factors. It would be like it'd take hours to go through everything. But that's everything has so many different factors to it, of course. And then another problem is that we know Andrew Tate. We're at a point now where we've seen him admit to sex trafficking. If you could say I want to wait for the results of whatever, and that's fine, I understand that. But at the end of the day, from what he has said, from what we've seen him brag about in his Hustlers University, about how he'd make the women fall in love with him, he'd have to have sex with them, he'd get them from other countries. Most of the time, they didn't even do sex work. He would take money from them by not paying them fully, dodging taxes. We've seen the information of him having bodyguards that wouldn't let women leave unless they felt unless he felt like they were in love with them. All these different things. We know he's like a really bad person. We know he's like a predatory individual. The problem is that so many young men. And one of the things I think young men identify with too is that he's just an edgy dickhead, and a lot of the clips they see of him just bullying women, so they like that. There are people that's part of a factor too for some people, but so many people have already made the decision that Andrew Tate was a good role model. And what happens is this happens for everybody. It's like an anchor bias. The first bit of information that you will interact with tends to be what you will perceive somebody as. So if you're a young man and you perceive Andrew Tate as a good role model, and you've been told this by other people that you like and you respect, and now all of a sudden a bunch of information comes out about how he's a bad person, you're not going to be easily swayed that he's a bad person because you've convinced yourself that he's a good person. We all engage in an anchor bias, and it's not easy to overcome. Nobody wants to be wrong, and it takes more convincing that you're wrong after you've made a decision in many instances because of that anchor bias than it would for you to buy into that thing first. That's why you see such massive issues with Facebook and Instagram propaganda invading old people's brains. They'll tell you that there's fucking there's like 7 ounces of whale cum in every gallon of water. If you see that on Facebook, all of a sudden the old people, oh yeah, there's how much whale cum you're drinking, it's that's a big problem. There's just so many factors, I think, that in this situation when it comes to Andrew Tate and the way that he's built himself up. So,
and it isn't obvious to me that he does.
And sorry, there does seem to be sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes there does seem to be a weaponization of sexual, or a lot of cases, false sexual assault claims against popular men. I'm not saying all of them are fake, not even, but there's enough fake claims for especially young men to develop a bias against thinking that like things are legit. It only takes 1 or 2 false claims for people to like go like, oh, I'm tuning out, and then they start to filter every single claim, even if it's valid, like in the Andrew Tate situation, for them to be like, I don't think that's real. I've seen everybody every day getting canceled for everything, and I've seen this person and they got a false claim. Oh, look, call me Carson. There was a false claim against him. So, that's sullied my perspective on this topic forever. So I know I'm talking longer than the video. I have a lot to say. Okay, shut the fuck up, bitch.
He doesn't bend a knee because of his stellar moral character, but because I'm not particularly, what would you say, impressed by what he's done on the sex business front. It seems to me a bit on the pimpy side, let's say. And I'm not a great admirer of pimps. So
it's so funny because that is such a highly contested point that he just made, and it baffles me and it blows the shit through my anus hole, and it annoys the fuck out of me. I will make the point that Andrew Tate, because this is another thing he said that he treats his webcam models differently than other people do. He treats them like prostitutes, and he's the pimp. And he's tried to make it seem like the word pimp is glorious. He's supposed to mean something cool, like penis in my pooper or something. He has like a whole, what is it, an acronym or whatever. It's supposed to be cool. And I see so many young men in the comments, and I'll say like, pimps are bad people. And I'll make the joke that they've watched Peaky Blinders once, and they think, or not Peaky Blinders, I'll say Boardwalk Empire. It's an excellent show, and they'll think that prostitutes are treated well, and they'll be like, yeah, see, there are some pimps that no, there's not. I just need you to understand something. There really isn't. There's not. I grew up in an area with prostitutes. Prostitutes tend to be funneled full of drugs and forced to have sex and barely keep any of the money that they make. And they get physically and mentally and emotionally abused and manipulated by their pimps. It's sad to see how well, I mean, it's not sad. It's almost a good thing. Your guys are so sheltered that you think that pimps are cool. They're not. The glorification of men who control women to force them to have sex in some way, it's not cool. And you might be like, yeah, but they don't have to. Yes, they do. Once you become a prostitute, you'll get in many cases, you'll get beaten if you try to stop. This isn't the glorious thing that you think it is. And it's another aspect of like the mythology of men. Because how cool is it to be a guy that like controls all these women? It's unfortunate. But you've been manipulated into thinking that there's something sexy about owning women. It's sad. It's sad that you think that. There's nothing cool about being a pimp. It would make more sense for these women to just have bodyguards, right? Just fundamentally, why wouldn't they just be in control of their own body to be able to sell their sex and have a bodyguard protect them? No, the guy owns them, and he may protect them from the guys that are paying him to fuck her, but he's not actually protecting those women, right? From himself, right? He's exploiting those women. So there's a lot of different problems in the perspective of young men in general.
Wait, even if they're the electronic version, and so but I don't know that much about the details of his life, and apart from that, rather casual diagnosis, I'm going to leave it alone. But there is a mystery there, and the mystery is, why has he captured the public imagination? And it's clear that he's become a voice, maybe like a kind of a violent rapper, same sort of attraction to young men.
Yeah, maybe. I actually think that's pretty solid. Yeah, I mean, and that's another conversation that like some like what is it called? I'm a little old. What is it called? Trap rap? There's something with a G. Grind rap, is that what it is? There is music in general that will glorify and basically make it sexualized, not even sexualized, but make it sexy to be an abusive gang member or, you know, pimp or something like that. There's a glorification of, you know, treating women in a disrespectful manner. So for sure. And it's not just rap music, but it does seem to be in rap a lot more than other music.
And that attraction
Is it grunge? I thought the grunge was like metal.
is
Drill rap, is that what it is? Okay, yeah.
the attraction of what's the alternative to a kind of cringing defeat, you know, and so maybe a forthright aggression is a preferable alternative to a cringing defeat. And I have some sympathy for that viewpoint, you know. So, and I think Tate at least stands for that. And apart from that, I don't know enough about him or what he's done or what he stands for to comment.
I wonder why he hasn't really educated himself on Andrew Tate too much. I wonder if it's because he feels like maybe some of it will conflict with him in a way that some of his audience won't like him. I don't know. Or maybe he just doesn't care.
And so we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you know, I guess I can't expect him to have like a super in-depth understanding of Andrew Tate. I will say, it's interesting that he has such doesn't have a super in-depth understanding of Andrew Tate or what he's done wrong, and he still doesn't like. And it seems what I get out of that is like, hey, I understand why he's popular, but I don't really like him or what he stands for. That's what I get out of that. I think that other people could probably interpret that differently. What I will say is there's another aspect to Andrew Tate as well that keeps him, you know, in the flow, and that is that like most of Andrew Tate's opposition from an optics perspective, they're all fat or blue-haired. Let's be absolutely real. And I know I'm fat. You know, I understand that the way that I come off, and to be fair, like I don't look as much like a My Little Pony neckbeard fedora wearing fuck in real life. You know, the camera angle that I operate with doesn't fully show me being 6'4", but realistically speaking, a lot of people who speak out against Andrew Tate, there's not a lot of strong, muscular, you know, stereotypical looking strong men speaking out against Andrew Tate, and that's another aspect to it too. And a lot of people, and again, Sneeko does this a lot, and it's a very unintelligent thing that he does, but it's still something that he and his fans will do, and that's because he's a 24-year-old or 25-year-old with the mentality of a 15-year-old. And that is like you're very quick to dismiss somebody based on like one characteristic, because they don't want to hear what you have to say. So they'll be like, oh, well, fat or blue hair or this or that. Oh, and that's pretty much the only thing that they value. Right, that there's a lack of value of intelligence. So that's certainly a perspective and an aspect as well. So there's a lot of stuff to keep in mind.